Reporters are also standing by. We are also having my colleagues in various strategic spots in Nairobi, and we'll be getting back to them to know exactly how things are in regards to that. And that is a conversation that we'll be having this morning, and I'll also be engaging my experts here, and we would like you to weigh in on the events of the nation, on the state of the nation, on our social media spaces. We are live on all our social media spaces as well. Allow me now to introduce the panel that will be helping us delve a little bit deeper into the conversation today, and beginning from my immediate right. From my immediate right, we have Mr. Leonard Kathafa, who is an economist and also a governance expert. And just next to him, we have Mr. Brian Omondi. Mr. Brian Omondi is a tax auditor and also a managing partner at Brian Forensic. Brian, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Well, welcome. First things first, what do you make of President's speech yesterday?
I think the President's speech yesterday brought some peace and tranquility in the country. The temperatures have been rising over the days, and I think within 24 hours, the President changed from his previous position to a position of reconciliatory and tranquility. And I believe that speech was good for the country, even though we have some reservations on the speech. Thank you.
I'm also looking at some of the things that he talked about, and you guys being in matters, finance, economics, he talked about the economy growing by about 5%, which is being buoyed by more or less some of the tax measures that we have in the country, some of the reprieves that the government has put in place to ensure this is happening. The cost of living, as he said, is coming down slowly but surely. He also talked about the cost of food coming down as well. This is a situation we're having on the ground.
Well, I think just to take you back, about 2 weeks ago, the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury read into the Parliament the budget highlights for the year 2024 and 2025. And in that budget highlight, he also put forward some of the measures the government is going to use to raise revenue. Now, if you look at the content of the budget highlight, as was read by the Cabinet Secretary, you see two stories. The story number one is the debt repayment. And the debt repayment, as per the budget highlights that were read, was coming to 1.8 trillion against a budget allocation of 4.0 trillion. Now, looking at those two storylines in the 2024-2025 budget line, you see a scenario where almost half of our budget allocation is going for debt repayment. And therefore, if you look at the way other arms of government have presented their budget for the 2024-2025, you realize, for example, that the judiciary has been allocated slightly over 23 billion. Parliament has been allocated slightly over 40 billion, 43.6 billion to be precise. And the executive, which is where the president sits, the ministry and state departments, have been allocated about 2.24 trillion. Now, it is okay for the executive to have that kind of money. But you realize that the Cabinet Secretary also went ahead and read to the nation some of the austerity measures that the government has put in place to ensure that they curb the budget allocation for the government. Now, if you critically look at the austerity measures that were provided by the Cabinet Secretary, then you see a lot of gaps. And as you're going to see in a short while, the government has cleverly reduced the budget allocation for ministries and state departments, which is very uncommon. Over the years, you realize that the budget allocation has been increasing. Yeah, if you look at the budget comparison for the last 5 years, you will see that each and every year the budget allocation has been increasing in ministries and state departments. But if you look at their first budget, 2023-2024 and 2024-2025, you see a significant cut in the allocation to the ministries and state departments. However, in Executive Order number 1 of 2023, the head of state created additional state departments within the existing ministries. For example, in the Ministry of Health, 2 state departments were created. The State Department for Medical Services and the State Department for Professional Standards. So you ask yourself, if you are championing austerity measures in government and you are cutting the government expenditures in state departments and ministries, what is the rationale of creating 2 additional state departments, which in turn are going to become full ministries? So by creating these additional departments, what you're trying to do to the budget is that you are increasing the administrative cost of running government. So whereas you are showing the bigger picture of reducing the government expenditure, indirectly, you are broadening the expenditure by creating departments and increasing the administrative cost of running government. So that is just one of the ways that the government is cleverly running away from the austerity measures that they're talking about by increasing the cost of running government. And you're going to explain more as we move forward.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
And Hon. Leonard, I'm looking at the president's speech yesterday, and a lot of Kenyans, of course, concentrated on where he said he has conceded and he will not assent to the bill. And the president actually started out by outlining some of his successes in regards to the economy and the state of the economy. I would like you to point out some of the things the president did mention, and especially on the state of the economy.
Yeah, the president is right. First of all, thank you for having me. And yes, the president is right in the sense that indicators of economic well-being are there. They are evident. They speak for themselves. He talked of inflation, for instance, having come down from a high of close to 9% at the time he took over, and gradually reducing to about 8%, 8-point-something% at about this time last year, and presently, I think, to a low of about 5% in May. At the moment, it must be about 5.2 thereabouts. That's inflation. And the CBK target, when it comes to controlling inflation, is 5% plus or minus 2.5%. So it means whatever the monetary policy that the CBK is executing is definitely working. Then, of course, he gave things that are relatable to wananchi. That is the price of basic foodstuffs. And in Kenya, unga is that standard. You know, unga is basically the standard of the impact on mwananchi. And at the point he took over, the year in which he took over, unga had risen to a high of about 250 shillings for a 2-kilogram packet. And we see it now come to about 100 shillings thereabouts for the same 2-kilogram packet at the moment. So again, that's an indicator that things are indeed working. Yes.
And gentlemen, to be very honest, is that the Eurobond is something that Kenyans were keeping a keen eye on, and he did mention that as of last week, the country has been able to pay off the $2 billion USD Eurobond that we had taken sometimes back in 2010. Brian, how does it inspire investor confidence in regards to that? Because some countries have not been able to offset their loans.
Well, I think to that extent we really have to thank the government, and not just thanking them. They have an obligation to pay that debt, because ideally, when the debt is due, the best thing to do and the prudent thing to do is to repay the debt. So the government has been keen on debt repayment, and that's why, as I said earlier, even if you look at the allocation on debt repayment towards the budget allocation, it takes almost half. All right. So the government, in terms of taking care of the debt situation of the country, they have done so well. Yeah, and I think that inspires investor confidence, and it's good for the country, unlike other countries that we can list that have been defaulting in their debts, etc. Yeah. So as far as the debt repayment is concerned, the government has done well. But as far as what the common person is feeling, I think that's where there's a problem. Yeah. And that's where the government has not addressed fully. And that's why you see the anger and the rage that is coming from the general population. Yeah.
Leonard, I also would like you to chip in regards to the $2 billion USD Eurobond that we have been able to pay. As of yesterday, the head of state said the last payment was done last week. Does this inspire investor confidence?
Absolutely, and I totally agree with my colleague Brian here that it's a positive thing. It's one of those things that the government should be celebrated for having achieved. As my colleague has said, there are economies that have gotten into debt default. And debt default is not a good situation. You know, there are ramifications, implications that go down to mwananchi when a government gets into debt default, which we probably will go into later in this conversation. But that they have paid is a very positive thing, and we must be mindful of the fact that this is debt that was taken by a different administration, and that basically kicked the can further down the road for this administration to pick up and to settle. So that is very commendable. And again, as my colleague has said, debt, when the government has a debt obligation, it does not matter which administration took it. The government is obliged to settle that debt, because governments exist in perpetuity. It means they are continuous, they are endless across administrations. So if one administration was irresponsible with the way it acquired its profligate debt, the burden is handed over to the next administration, which is what has happened in this instance. This administration is settling debt, profligate borrowing that was undertaken under the previous administration, and it is now doing it to discharge its responsibilities. What my colleague may also have mentioned is that debt service is one of the first charges on the consolidated fund. When government collects its tax revenues, it puts them into a consolidated fund account, and that is where payments that government that's where payments for expenses that government incurs come from. The first charge on that consolidated fund is towards debt, particularly external debt. We cannot afford to default. So this is a very commendable thing that the government has done.
And of course, we will also be discussing what would have happened if we were not able to pay, because we've seen some countries who are not able to pay their debt obligations. But before we go back to our live discussion here, let's have a feel of what is happening at Nairobi Central Business District, CBD. As I mentioned earlier, more or less it's slowly but picking up, and especially on businesses. As you can see on your screen, my colleague Alan Aoko is at the Nairobi CBD. Good morning, Alan. Kindly tell us what exactly is happening in Nairobi.
Morning to you, Ben, here in the center of Nairobi City. We here at Archives, a very popular place for Nairobians and most Kenyans who do visit this major city. Normally what happens here is a beehive of activities where people come and sit and relax. But it's a contrast today, this morning, on this 27th day, a very chilly one to be exact. People here are not as many as you usually find them. We came here to find people are just, minimal, alighting from the vehicles that are still coming through. And indeed, we can confirm that public transport has not been interrupted this morning. We are seeing people alighting from various parts of the city here at the Archives, at the Kenya National Archives, which is also known as a major terminus here in Nairobi. As you can see on your screens, we have many people just, waiting for their vehicles, and also, we can say also that it's not the usual crowd that we see usually. We still also do have security here. We have the police just keeping a vigil here, just making sure that no peace is interrupted by anyone. In fact, here we usually find people sitting around the perimeter walls that are adjacent to the Archives area here, but people are not allowed. If you look at the bottom right where the officers are standing, that's where people usually sit, catching some time there, maybe waiting for a vehicle or people they are meeting. But today, as you can see, the police are standing where people always sit, indicating that it is still a very secure place at this point. However, you can also see the vehicles and the people just minding their own business. When we were coming here, we did see some businesses shut. We did see some, trying their luck and opening. But from what we are seeing even here at the National Archives, public transport have agreed to continue ferrying passengers. As you can see, business as usual here. We have yet to see anything that is out of the ordinary besides the few crowds here. We are seeing also the municipality here, the county officials just cleaning the streets. continuing to clean the streets. We've seen also the barricades that are usually around near Hilton Hotel that were uprooted. They are still also being cleared here. We have, as you can see, a truck full of security officials just, keeping point here, making sure that no one is interrupting the smooth flow of traffic at this point. But so far, what we are seeing here is a normal business, albeit a bit muted. We can admit and show you that it's not the usual kind of pandemonium and busy streets that we see here on a normal weekday. It's a chilly morning and people are just minding their own business. The Kencom bus stop, as you can see on your screens there, also still having their usual vehicles waiting for passengers at the very busy junction there, where we usually have taxis amalgamating with the matatus as well, and motorbikes. That's usually a very popular place for motorbikes to pick up passengers who are in a hurry. They're also not here as such. The police have moved them away from there. And that is what is happening right here now, Troy, as you can see, where Kenyans are just minding their own business at this time. And, until we see something, there's nothing much to report at this time. As you can see, people still moving about their business. We usually have, even shoe shiners here trying to clean people's shoes. It has been chilly and it has been drizzly. People probably have mud on their shoes. The shoe shiners are here as well, doing their service as usual. And this place, if you know it very well, also we usually have preachers here, but they are not there here today. We usually have a lot of hawking going on here. That one is missing, except for the one or two people who are just passing by. That is what is happening here. And if you see right now, you see some of the businesses that have been closed. There's usually two businesses. I can tell from where I'm standing, there's usually a merchandise shop there. It's closed. I guess business people are also trying to put in caution. They are not sure what will happen. Some of them have put their shutters halfway through the door. They are not sure whether to open fully or not. But as you can see, they are trying their best. Some are still cleaning their shops as an aftermath of what happened the other day. And, just being cautious in general. But this is what you can report for now from the National Archives, which is a major terminus here in Nairobi, a meeting place of sorts where people come and meet and go about their business, Roy.
Thank you. That has been my colleague Alan Aoko live at Archives, Nairobi CBD, giving us a feel of how things are. And without diluting, what he has talked about is that, yes, business is slowly but surely picking pace, but some people have decided to be cautious. You have seen huge police presence in riot gears, ready for any eventualities or what may transpire a little bit later on, keeping vigil until we ensure that everything is back to normal. It's usually a very busy bus termini, and as you can see from the pictures, there's just some people continuing with their day-to-day activities. And we'll be getting back to other situations in other parts of the country, including Kisumu and also Mombasa, where we're keeping tabs, and also Achola live. We'll be getting that a little bit later on. But for now, we back to our discussion. I'm joined by Leonard Kafafa and Brian Omondi. Kafafa being an economist and governance expert, and Omondi, who is a forensic auditor and also a governance expert. We were looking at what the head of state talked about yesterday, and one of the things that he mentioned, other than saying that he is not going to be assenting to the contentious bill, is that they were going to have a conversation with the youth, and also the government is going to adopt austerity measures, including the counties. So a lot of budget cuts to ensure that we have a lean and workable both budget and also finances cascading down to county level. And perhaps to what we were talking about in regards to the debt, the $2 billion USD we've been able to pay up, and inflation, the head of state yesterday did mention that it has fallen from a high of 8 to 5%, something Leonard has also observed. I would like you to point out in regards to that and how the dynamics are more or less trying to make sure that the cost of living is brought down? Something that Kenyans have been clamoring for.
Thank you so much. That's a very good question. Now, I think as we have both alluded to, the priority of this government now is debt repayment. And it is interesting to note that a greater portion of this debt that the government is repaying is domestic debt. Now, by the government paying domestic debt, it means that our banks have money. And because our banks have money, Kenyans can be able to access facilities from the bank and spur economic growth. So in terms of the government's priority on payment of the debt, it has really spurred the economic growth because there is there's flow of cash in the economy, and as a result of that, economic activities are taking place and government is raising money. Yeah, so by prioritizing on debt repayment as a main priority for this government in the previous budget and the current budget, I think is a plus to the government. In fact, in some quarters we say that debt repayment has become a state department because of the focus of the government in ensuring that it doesn't default in the debt repayment. And that is contributing positively to the economy, as my colleague has alluded to.
Yeah. And Leonard, the head of state did mention something that Kenyans really need to take very seriously, that for every 100 shillings we collect, 61 shillings go to debt repayment.
Yeah, that is it's an untenable position for any government, even at an individual level. If more than half of your income goes towards servicing your debt, then you're in a precarious financial position. So that's a position that ought to be reversed, and hence, as Brian has said, the focus of the government on settlement of debt. I'll just go one step further and say perhaps the one other thing that the government may consider doing as finances become available is to settle pending bills. Because pending bills to contractors and other people are also debts that ought to be settled. And when you settle those, then you get a lot more money circulating within the economy. And perhaps that's the disconnect that people have with what the government has attempted to do, and the fact that sometimes there may not be money in the pocket, because there is hardly any trickle down as a result of pending bills. Once the government begins to tackle those, of course, priority, as Brian has said, priority is to settle domestic debt, I mean, in terms of the bonds and the T-bills and that sort of thing. And then, of course, the external debt that we have, and then thereafter, perhaps move towards pending bills. Once they settle those, then we'll begin to see a lot more money being put in the hands of, in the pockets of Kenyans.
Yeah. According to the president, the economy has grown by 5.6%, Brian, and there are going to be a lot of budget cuts. He did mention himself. What are some of the effects of these budget cuts to the economy?
Thank you so much. That's a very good question once again. If you look at the government budgeting process, the government is guided by about 5 factors when they are doing their budgeting. Number one is the Vision 2030. So as they do their budget, they ensure that in their term, in the next 5 years, they break down what they can, their vision towards attaining Vision 2030 and narrow it down to 5 years. And then they plan within the 5 years, but with the goal of the Vision 2030. Number two, they're also driven by their policies. But now to answer your question, yes, the government has exhibited a very great deal in terms of demonstrating that they are adopting austerity measures to reduce the government expenditure and deal with the current problem we have, where the government cannot be able to meet its expenditures. But if you critically look at the policy of government in terms of the austerity measures taken, then you realize that they have missed it at some point. And this is my reason behind that. Take, for example, the expenditure on the agricultural sector. In the 2020, if you compare, by the way, if you want to look at the budget well, it's important that you look at the previous budgets and compare with the current so that you can be able to get the context. So if you look at the 2023-2024 budget, and you compare it with the 2024-2025 budget, you realize that, for example, in the agricultural sector, there is a cut of 2.6 billion. Now, the question you ask yourself is this. The government's budget for this year is underpinned by the bottom-up economic transformation, right? Yeah. And according to that economic transformation, the government says that they are keen on food security. So if their priority, according to their policy and transformation agenda, says that they are keen on food security, why this significant cut in a very critical aspect of food security, the agricultural sector? The other point is, if you look at the universal health care, for example, you realize that, for example, in the current budget, there's a cut of 1.9 billion compared to the previous budget. So universal health is one of the main agenda for the government under the bottom-up economic transformation. But the cut is quite significant. Compare this to the cut, for example, in the presidency. You realize in the presidency, they are increasing expenses that are not really necessary. All right? So this is what Kenyans are seeing, that there is a lot of wastage in terms of what the government prioritizes in the presidency, for example, vis-a-vis what the common person wants to feel. Let me tell you, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics report indicates that about 38.6% of Kenyans are poor. All right? So in a population of about 56 million Kenyans, we are saying that slightly over 21 million are poor, and therefore they cannot be able to afford basic services. So if the government is making significant cuts in terms of the budget on the basic services, for example, if you look at the education sector, as I've mentioned earlier, you realize that the areas that are going to be affected are the school feeding program, the free primary education, the water sector. So if the government has significantly reduced budget in these core basic services, then it means that these poor people, who are almost half the population of the country, cannot be able to take their children to school. They cannot be able to afford basic healthcare services and medical services. And that's why now Kenyans are feeling this very significantly moving forward. Yeah, and that's why the anger is coming up, because the policies of government, whereas in the face value, it appears that they're trying to address serious matters that are affecting the Kenyans, but it is not trickling down to the Kenyans. And I think that's where we are.
Yeah, and in terms of loans, this is something that has come up even in the conversation that Kenyans are having. And some of the loans that we are having from IMF, World Bank, have been said that they have strings attached. You have to do A, B, C, D. And one of the strings was we had to do away with the subsidies, right? Leonard, I'm looking at those loans that have strings attached, and some of the strings are really tightening around our necks. How do we ensure that we reduce on the borrowing, in as much as we want to, by cutting down some of the things that the head of state talked about? How do we ensure that we are not slaves of our lenders?
You've talked about these Bretton Woods institutions and how they have imposed very stringent conditions on our borrowing. But what we must remember is that these lenders, these Bretton Woods institutions, are lenders of last resort. You go to them when you're most desperate. You don't go to them when things are okay. You know, you have other avenues of borrowing. You know, you have multilateral loans that you can get from concessional loans that you can get from multilateral lenders, other lenders, other than the Bretton Woods institutions. So the fact that we are recoursing to them means we are very desperate. And as the Bible says, the borrower is always slave to the lender. So when you are desperate and you're borrowing, it's the lender who dictates the conditions. I dare say that this budget, this year's budget, was informed in part by these Bretton Woods institutions. They dictated, I mean, for example, the very unpopular car tax, I think, of is it 2.5% yes. of the value of the car. That was not anything that the government would have wanted to impose on its citizens. But because we really need these Bretton Woods institutions, we need to borrow from them. We've had to go to them, we've had to ask them to give us support, and in turn, they have dictated some of these conditions. So in fact, there's a conversation around this to the effect that now that we have rescinded some of these unpopular tax measures, we are probably headed for a fallout with the IMF or the World Bank. So that's a conversation that needs to be looked at. Even as emotions are high about the fact that we have to borrow from them, we need to know where we need to interrogate why we have come to that point where we are that desperate to have borrowed from them. But I think in the budget, the government is also, going by the budget, the government is also committed to reducing its borrowing, because if you look at it, I think we've reduced, there's a budget deficit of about 400 to 500 billion shillings, which is an improvement from last year's budget deficit, which is about 900 billion shillings. So meaning that we have tweaked our budget to the point where our borrowing now is substantially reduced. So the deficit now is down to 400 thereabout billion shillings, as opposed to 900 billion shillings in the last year's budget. So yeah, I think we are trying, we are making, we are tightening our belts. It's not a perfect process. There'll be hits and misses, but we are getting there.
Yeah.
We are getting
and do you
there.
think maybe we should resort to local borrowing or government floating bonds and securities?
Not quite, because when you make it too attractive, when you make government bonds and securities extremely attractive, then you crowd out the private sector from the market. And that has impact now on people who want to borrow from banks. Bank loans become extremely expensive so that they can compete with what the government is giving. So that's not the right thing to do. And if you look at this year's budget, actually both domestic borrowing and external borrowing have been reduced significantly. Yeah.
Brian, the head of state also mentioned that on Sunday and also yesterday that he is going to have a conversation with the young people. And we have seen what the young generation, the Gen Zs, are able to do. They are learned. They're even far much learned than we are. They are more strategic than we are. And he wants to rope them in. How can they help us? Because now the finance bill is out. We need a new one. How can we rope in the young generation to ensure that the next one is not rejected in the magnitudes that we witnessed in the other one?
Wow, that's a very good question. Well, if you look at the issues that the young people are raising, the young people are saying that they don't have opportunities for job locally. And I think if you have been keen in the recent past, you have seen a significant number of young people who are trying to leave the country to go and find for themselves in other countries. You look at businesses that are now transforming to informal arrangement. Now, what is the reason of all this we are talking about? The government, even in the current Finance Act, the 2023-2024 Finance Act, the government tried to come up with measures of increasing taxes. And what they did is that they came up with very aggressive measures. And even the current Finance Act, it was fought. It's only that people didn't come to this level. But it was aggressively fought, but the MPs and the government found their way through. But what is the danger of increasing the taxes, and how does it impact the population, and especially the young people who have now come up very strongly, to push the government? Now, there is this quite often cited curve. It's called the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve was underpinned by an economist called Arthur Laffer. And Arthur Laffer says that when the government increases taxes to some point, it results to an increase in revenue. But if the government increases taxes beyond that point, then there'll be a consequent decrease in revenue. All right? And why will there be a decrease in revenue? This will be because the people will resort to leaving the country, for example, because they can't afford to pay the tax. They will not have anything to go home with. All right? So because they don't have disposable income, they would attempt to leave the country. Some businesses will now try to shift into the informal sector. And as a result of that, the revenue will dip. And when the revenue dips, then the effect in the economy will be significant and quite huge the way we are experiencing it right now. Yeah, so I think to answer your question is that the effect of the previous Finance Act has been felt over the months until now. And that's why at this point, it was resisted vehemently that this cannot continue because it was quite significant. The impact was quite significant. Yeah.
Leo, I'm looking at the finance bill that has been rejected in totality. And let's be very honest. There are some clauses there that would have favored a lot of Kenyans. For example, the monthly savings of up to 30,000 towards retirement schemes were scheduled for exemption from income tax. Looking at small businesses and farmers had been exempted from electronic tax invoice system, e-teams. There are some good things in that. Are there some of the things that we can borrow from there as we plan for a new finance bill? Because that is exactly what is going to happen.
To my mind, the finance bill was largely good. Of course, it had quite a number of thorny issues, but it was not wholesale bad. I'll give you an example. The proposal to widen the tax base by, say, bringing more people on board through measures like e-teams, to create more visibility for people to be seen who are not paying tax. Because we must be mindful of the fact that tax paying is a good thing. Paying tax is not evil. Every citizen in this country has an obligation to pay their taxes. Governments run on tax revenues. They don't run by themselves. I mean, that's how they make money to pay. That's how they get their money to pay for goods and services that we enjoy through tax revenue. So tax paying is a good thing. It must never be seen as an evil thing. So the fact that we were trying to expand the tax base is a very good thing and should be commended and should be carried over even into the new finance bill as we approach it. This is because Kenya, at the moment in Kenya, we have about 8 million pins, that go to individuals and to companies. And of those 8 million pins, only 4 million pins are active, meaning that these are pins that file their returns annually and pay their taxes when they're due. And of the 4 million pins, a significant number are companies. So it means out of a population of 54 million, if we have, say, about 20 million people who are eligible to pay tax, only about 2 or 3 million people are paying tax. It's unfair. It means the tax burden, the direct tax burden is being borne by a small proportion of citizens who ought to be paying their tax. So that proposal in the tax, in the finance bill 2024, to enhance that revenue collection through widening the tax base, through turnover tax, through e-teams, was a very good proposal, among others.
And we'll be looking at that, and especially how do we make the tax regime that we have in the country more attractive, and especially for investors. We've had cases of others complaining that we might even decide to move our business to other countries. How do we make our tax regime very, very popular? All right, let's now have a look at how the Nairobi CBD is panning out, and especially Moi Avenue. And I can see my colleague Joseph Wahungu, who is currently on standby to bring us a live update in regards to how things are panning out in the CBD. Over to you, Joseph.
Well, Ben Njue, thank you very much. We're coming to you live from the CBD. This is at the junction of Kenyatta Avenue and Moi Avenue, just at my back. And this is one of the most strategic areas in this town, because if you look at my back, this is where we have the terminus. We normally have behind me the Thika Road terminal. Most of the public transport matatus normally stop there for people coming from Thika Road and other areas coming to town. And normally this place is normally very busy at this hour of the day. But as you can see behind me, this place looks deserted at the moment. Not very many people. We just have a few boda guys maybe waiting for commuters there. We have shops closed, as you can see. Just some matatus very far away from us at the the right-hand side. Maybe they're waiting for people to come, or maybe they have just people have alighted coming to town. But one of the most striking things here is that this street looks deserted. Looks like there's nobody here, and perhaps showing the extent to which many people have chosen to stay away from town in anticipation of the expected demos that were supposed to be happening today. And everything seems to be cool. Everything seems to be calming down. Things are taking pace slowly. We're expecting that perhaps later on during the day, maybe this place will be full of people, maybe the businesses will be opened. But as you can see, this is how things look like here. Not many traffic, no traffic officers on site. Things seem to be flowing, so this is the extent to which, you know, the expected demos have left this side of a town with. And if Matia perhaps can pan slowly to this other side of town, there's normally a very busy shopping center here that has been closed. So, of course, one of the places where we have very many people walking around, some going to, you know, to their place of work, of course. So this is how the situation looks like on a very chilly Thursday morning. Not very many people who have walked or drove or came into town. Just a few minutes to 10 o'clock, rather 11 o'clock. And normally, for any person who has been into the city at this hour, we normally have, you know, very many vehicles at this point. But today it seems deserted. Not very many people. Now, at the far end, in our right side, you can see matatus coming in. That is Kenyatta Avenue. Normally, when we have demos, we normally have protesters streaming into that area. So today, we don't have many of them. We don't have no one. Actually, there's no demo. There's no police officers on site. So that's exactly how the town looks like. We are still keeping watch here to try to see how things will be. Of course, as you can see, these are shopping centers. We have one of the most popular supermarkets in town here, which is closed at this hour. This normally runs for 24 hours. This is Naiva supermarket. As you can see, it's closed, only a few workers there. And this is how things are in town. We expect that perhaps later on during the day, there might be changes here. But as things stand, not very many people, just a few people walking up and down, perhaps going to work, others just minding their business. Not much to talk about here. Of course, matatus streaming slowly, perhaps leaving town, maybe heading to Thika Road or Ngong Road. So that's how the town looks like at this hour. So we will be, of course, keeping check here, try to see how things are, as we also continue walking around town. And of course, we'll be keeping our viewers posted as to how the situation is in town, Bentroy.
Thank you, Joseph Wahungu, live from Moi Avenue. Just has been Joseph Wahungu. And as you can see, looks like a Sunday morning in Nairobi, despite the fact that today is a very busy Thursday. And many of the business have opted to shut down. A popular supermarket that operates for 24 hours there today has closed its doors and is keeping us updated in regard to that. But one thing that is sure is that business is slowly but surely picking up pace. Of course, we will be crossing over to Mombasa all right. And as my colleague Anmboro is actually preparing for that, we also be moving all the way to Kisumu. Achola Simon will be telling us how it is, because actually, gentlemen, I was in Mombasa the day of the demos. We actually marooned from the one side because of the demos, but so far so good from the reports that are coming from many counties and many headquarters is that things are slowly but surely picking up pace. Kenyans are still waiting to see how the day pans out. We'll be crossing over to know exactly how that pans out as well. And Brian, as we were looking at how we really need to make our business environment more robust. During the public participation, many companies here in the country, of course, objected that tax regime and said that some of the taxes that you guys are piling on us are going to push us to other countries just in East Africa. How do we ensure our tax regime do not hurt businesses? Yesterday, the head of state said that 5 cement companies have already applied to start working here in the country.
Wow, I think what investors look at in terms of the tax regime is the stability and the predictability of the tax regime. Investors want a stable and predictable tax environment, because that way they're able to plan and know that their business is not going to be affected by the increase in taxes that are not predictable. I think the main challenge, and this came out...
Just a minute. I'm informed that we need to cross over. My colleague JJ Kioria is, if I'm not wrong, at State House Road. Right, my director, Muga? Yes. He's indeed at State House. Good morning, JJ. Where exactly are you positioned and what is currently happening there?
Thank you, Ben Troy. Njue, we coming to you live from the Kenyatta Avenue on this other side of, near the All Saints Cathedral. Actually, where we're standing at is at the joint that leads towards Community and Kenyatta Avenue, pouring onto the Uhuru, that is Uhuru Highway. But of course, this is also a very critical joint because these are the intersections. There are two intersections here really that leads towards State House. One of them is Nyerere Road that will lead you to a processional way, and then there is the AIC Milimani Road that also leads to State House. Why are we here? As you rightly pointed out, there were planned demonstrations really by the protesters, the anti-finance bill protesters, who had threatened that they would make their way to State House today. And as you can see, all security protocols to cushion State House has already been put in place. Let's start with Nyerere Road. As you can see, from Kenyatta, from the Kenyatta Way, you would normally use Nyerere Road probably to access the other side of Nairobi University, or use it to access Processional Way if you are coming from the Kenyatta Avenue. But as you can see, there's already a roadblock on that side. That's a police lorry that has blocked that road. That means Nyerere Road today will be completely inaccessible to members of the public and any other motorist. But you can see traffic is flowing normally on Kenyatta Avenue. The vehicles headed towards the CBD and the ones exiting from CBD or Uhuru Highway. But as you can see, clearly, the Nyerere Road is completely sealed off by police. I will be showing you the one that goes to AIC Milimani shortly, but then this is the road now that leads also to Community. Traffic is flowing normally. Probably you would say this is not the normal situation. There are typically at this hour there ought to be more vehicles on a natural day, and so you would that's the road that leads to Community stage. And traffic really continuing to flow normally, though not as many vehicles as you would expect. But the traffic really flows. I want us to pan a bit, even as, and of course on the other side, headed towards Integrity Center. Again, also traffic flowing normally. But what you ought to see is the entrances towards State House completely sealed off by police officers to cushion access to State House. That road there is where I wanted my camera person to show you. This road heads to AIC Milimani. Past the AIC Milimani gate, it leads towards State House, particularly gate D, and also has been sealed off by police. You can see a roadblock also being manned by police officers as it also leads to on your way to State House. This morning, I've met the police commander, Nairobi police commander, that is Adamson Bungei, and of course trying to inspect some of the works being done by his officers in ensuring that the city is safe, and most importantly also ensuring that State House, a critical infrastructure of government, a protected area, is not accessed by protesters. This is not the first time that demonstrations really have threatened to access State House. You remember during the Azimio demonstrations, there was actually a threat by demonstrators to go towards State House. That never happened. Most of the times they never went past the CBD, even after threatening that they will be going to State House. You can see the number of police officers in the city. The numbers are quite telling, and it tells you today is quite a significant day in the sense of security and ensuring that in terms of stability, that the city remain stable and secure, and also sealing the State House, a critical government infrastructure, like I've said, and a protected area from being accessed by demonstrators. We'll be doing rounds because this is not the only access to State House, because this heads to AIC Milimani. The one on Nyerere Road, there's processional way. That's the official way towards State House. Normally, that's where the president exits through when there are official ceremonies. So at least we can confirm that these two ways that leads towards State House are sealed, and we'll be looking at other entrances to see how the police are faring in terms of sealing off these areas for access by demonstrators. But for now, back to you, Ben Troy, our broadcasting house.
Thank you so much. My colleague JJ there at the Kenyatta Junction there, pointing out that all roads leading to the house on the hill, that is State House, have been shut for now. And as protesters had vowed that they are going to be marching to State House. But remember, that is also a protected area, and it has been cordoned off by the police. And from Kenyatta Avenue, we cross over to Githurai. My colleague Abdiaziz Hashim has been keeping tabs with what is happening at this moment. And good morning, Hashim. Kindly bring us up to speed with what is happening in Githurai.
Well, Troy, thank you so much. We're here at Githurai along Thika Road. We have been touring this particular area since morning, and of course what we can confirm to you is that fewer cars are entering into the Central Business District. What on a normal day you will see many cars trolling to the Central Business District. That has not been the case, but the public service vehicles as well as border operators have been operating well within the confines of the CBD. A little while ago, before we came on air, what we can confirm to you is that we saw buses coming out of the Kahawa barracks entering the Central Business District just to ascertain security. And along the route, all the way from starting from the Central Business District all the way to Githurai, we have reached and we have come back as well, is that security have been mounted. You do remember what happened on Tuesday in this particular road, where many of residents who reside here were walking towards the town to Jello to follow, or rather join their fellow anti-protesters who are protesting against the finance bill of 2024. But what we want to show you behind us here is, Githurai is known for its transport system and of course the markets which are here. As my cameraman Lugusa is showing you, border operators are operating normally, and of course you can see some of them are even being washed currently as we speak. The mothers who are selling as well as men who are selling groceries have continued with their businesses. Business has been usual here, as is the case, but you can see those matatus, as per usual, they're entering the Central Business District. Along this particular route, you remember last time it was impassable with many security contingents sent here to, of course, quell the protesters. But this has not been the case. We have been roaming around this particular Thika road for the last 40 minutes or so just to get a feel. We have been able to speak to some of the business operators. Some have welcomed the president's move of withdrawing the finance bill of 2024. Now they say that the legislators must take up that particular initiative and of course be done with the finance bill of 2024, but they were asking pertinent question as to what will finance the 3.9 trillion budget that was taken to Parliament by none other than Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Njue. They are also saying now that given that the president has been able to shoot down the Finance Bill 2024. They hope things will be better in the coming days. But from here, Thika Road, we're just here at Thika Road, but we'll go all the way to Langata as well as Wayakiwe and in other parts of the country that we have been designated, all the way to even Mombasa Road, just to ascertain the feel and talk to the residents around this particular area. But for now, I need to hand you over back to Troy.
Thank you, Abdiaziz Hashim, live from Githu 45. As you can see, the superhighway there, all clear. Had been a scene of some chaotic scenes the day before yesterday, and he says that he did notice some of the military trucks ferrying some soldiers from Kahawa Barracks to the CBD. Remember, the head of state did say, and even Parliament did pass, that the Kenya Defence Forces be used to fortify some of the protected areas in the country in the wake of the protests that have been going on for the last couple of days now. Well, back to our topic of discussion here. Just to remind you, we are with Leonard Kafafa, who is an economist and governance expert, and also we have Mr. Brian Mondi, who is an forensic auditor and also a governance expert. We are looking at the business situation and in the state of the nation. Yesterday, the head of state did mention some of the milestones that the government have been able to achieve and also shut down the contentious finance bill 2024. As they have said, they will be keeping us updated with all the latest happening in the country as the day pans out. Well, back to our topic of discussion, and apologies for interjecting, but we were looking at how we can make the business environment or the tax regime in regards to businesses more conducive. You do remember during the public participation, even big telecommunications companies in the country said that whatever we are talking about in the tax bill is a little bit unattainable. How do we ensure that we create a comfortable environment for more? Because if we have more investors, we will be able to do all our tax obligations and more.
Thank you so much. So I think, as I was saying, what the investors are looking for, and this is what came out through the public participation, is that they want a stable and predictable tax environment. And they are telling the government that they should try by all means to avoid frequent changes to the tax code or the tax obligation. And should they intend to put a change in a tax obligation in terms of the increases in taxes, then they are saying that you need to tell us in advance so that we can be able to plan and structure our business accordingly. And again, I think the other thing that came up very strongly during the public participation is the fact that there is a general feeling that the government has introduced several tax measures in the previous Finance Act, but most of these measures have not generated the results that the people can feel that as a result of the increase in tax, our lives have been transformed in this manner. All right? So they are saying, yes, you have come up with so many measures. We are not seeing tangible results from those measures. So you would rather wait and we deal with the measures you have given so far, so that once we see some results on it, then we can have the confidence in you introducing additional measures. So generally, those are the two areas that I feel are impacting the investors. And if the government could listen and just ensure that there is no frequent changes to the tax obligations, and there is a planned or an orderly manner of introducing new tax measures, that will be a good thing for the investors.
Well said. And we are taking a quick break, but when we come back, we will also be looking at the governance aspect of it all, because at the end of the day, we have a good and accountable government and also all agencies of government. Because I remember during the protest, a lot of you have talked about we don't have an issue with paying taxes. We have an issue on how those taxes are used. We'll be putting those into perspective, including cutting down on expenditure, just like the president said, after this short break. You're watching Please Check.
Kikohozi cha muda wowote, kutokwa na jasho kwa wingi usiku, uchungu kwenye kifua, afya kudhoofika, tafuta matibabu.
Imagine being born in a family of parents who have no education, no formal job, no business. The animals they had have been taken away due to insecurity, so they are just left vulnerable. So by the time I was finishing Form 4, college life, I had to struggle to pay for my fees. Yes. Because already the parents have died. I've told you the story. I'll tell you the story of my parents.
When are you ever going to stop?
Surely you are not one to doubt the repercussions?
You need to get back to the ring. Kaikara has not yet won.
Did he grow weak or something?
It's time to show Kaikara Joy left her man here.
We'll create a small scandal. Hello. Just follow my instructions. Take good care of them. The only problem I have is you driving that agenda to achieve something. Shame on you.
Pressure babangu inapanda daily. I want to end this once and for all.
What are you doing here? Talk about.
I hope that was a rhetorical question, Margot. We don't have time to waste today.
Hey, Aticho, and who do you think you are to talk to fellow students like that?
I can talk to you idiots the way I please. I am now in charge.
Tija, what are those? What do you mean, what are those? I've taught this many times, I can't have lost count.
Hey, Mr. Teacher, maybe you taught that on another class.
Nonsense inside that trouser. You think you can put us around as you please?
Ne, Atito Jakuru. We copy exams together always. No, you think you can teach us what exactly?
You know, you're so full of yourself, you know that? This hard head of yours is going to be your downfall.
And now you are talking.
Yes, I'm talking, yeah? And it's regression, not regression.
Welcome back to Biz Check, and my name is Njue, joined by Leo Kafafa, who is an economist and also a public policy analyst. Just next to him, we have Brian Omondi, who is a tax auditor and also a governance and leadership expert. Gentlemen, let's look at the governance, because at the end of the day, we are talking about the policies, we're talking about everything, but we need to be governed in a way that is conducive even for the businesses that are being invested here, including counties. How do we cut on that? But before then, let's first of all cross over to the lakeside city of Kisumu. Achola Simon is currently keeping tabs with what is happening there. Good morning, Achola. How is Kisumu?
Thank you very much, Ben Troy Njue. All was well in Kisumu CBD up until around 10 a.m. This morning, when you could actually start feeling the tension that was actually engulfing the CBD. And what has happened is that all business people and each and every person who had actually opened business today with the hope of actually going about their businesses normally has actually closed. And you can actually feel the tension that is actually renting the air here in Kisumu County. There's been a number of running battles with police officers who are actually trying as much as they can to ensure that the situation here in Kisumu County is actually normal. As I speak to you right now, there's a bigger procession that is coming all the way from Nyalenda. Nyalenda usually is a start point of demonstrations in this county. And what I'm being told is that there's a larger procession that is actually coming all the way from Nyalenda all the way to the CBD. But you can also see that a number of roads.
That has been a live coverage there from Achola Simon there from Kisumu, and it tells us that have been reported cases of running battles between the youth and the police. Let's now cross over to the coastal county of Mombasa, and my colleague is currently standing by telling us, all right, let's have those pictures from the coastal city of Mombasa. Well, as you can see, those are live pictures from Mombasa. I don't know exactly where in particular, but as you can see, there are some youths gathering around, and some of the businesses closed actually. I'm not quite sure. I can see a number of pressmen there, and they more or less seem to be a procession. From the look of things, the right hand side of the road is quite busy than the other, and we will be getting a little bit more on that when my colleagues are a little bit more composed in regards to that. But we are looking at the state of the nation, and more specifically how we can cut down on expenditure and some of the challenges, because now for the first time ever a finance bill has been shot down. In the history of Kenya, there's no time that we've ever had a finance bill shot down by the head of state, because what happens mostly is that he returns it to Parliament with some amendments, and then they pass it, and then he assents it. But now it has been shot down. So where does that take us? Let me hear it from Leo.
Yeah, Ben, as you rightly put it, this is unprecedented. We've never had an instance where the head of state recommends that all the clauses contained in the finance bill be expanded. Mm-hmm. It's a first. And it's interesting in the sense that the Constitution, I think, is a little grey about that kind of scenario. Mm. What happens? Is it possible for the president to at that point where he's supposed to give assent, is it constitutionally possible for him to recommend that the entire finance bill be done away with? I don't think it is. It's not possible. It's not within his remit as president to order that the finance bill be done away with. The best, what usually happens in these instances, as set out in Article 115 of the Constitution, is that whenever the president has issues with the finance bill, he sends it back to Parliament with the recommendation that those issues be amended, not deleted, amended. So him advising that all these clauses be deleted is not an amendment. Deletion is not an amendment. So it's a grey area, and it's open to multiple interpretations about what the situation portends going forward.
That also reminds us of what happened in 2022, where we had two factions of IEBC. We had a grey area there as well, but I'm quite sure we're going to navigate this as well. Something very keen that the head of state was very keen on is that in terms of renovations that were there, some of the development expenditures will be cut down, and also even ask the county governments to also be very keen in terms of how we spend our resources. The youths are saying we don't have an issue paying taxes, but we need people to be accountable for these taxes. Right.
Accountability.
Easier said than done.
It's a big problem. And not just in Kenya, by the way. Even if you look at the OECD countries, I mean, this is a big problem even there. You look at UK, you look at the US, you look at Canada, it's a big problem. Accountability is a big problem. And that's because of how the budget is crafted. If you speak very closely with the people in the National Treasury, they will tell you the truth of how the budget process is. And I've been lucky to have some very close friends who are part of the budget process in the National Treasury. And they tell you that the budget making process is pegged on the priorities of the government. And the priorities of the government are majorly 5. Number 1 is the Vision 2030. Number 2 is, and by Vision 2030 what we mean is that the government wants to align its priorities with the Vision 2030. So that in the plan they come up with in the 5 years, it is a plan towards attaining Vision 2030 for the country, all right? Number 2 is the political class, and this is where the problem is. The political class, it's a sad affair, but the fact of the matter is political leadership is not free. Political leadership is not free. And by this, what we mean is that every political leadership that comes into place have to refund themselves the cost of earning that political leadership.
Allow me just to interject and say that those are live pictures from Mombasa County, and that is Moi Avenue. I think this is the first county that we have seen youth already starting to protest, and they are headed, from what I'm informed, is that they are heading to the Mombasa CBD, and they have been grouping since morning, and now they have decided to protest. Okay, of course we will be getting a little bit more in regards to that. As you can see, they have placards. Yes, but we'll be getting a little bit more on that as we go on. Apologies for that.
Thank you so much. So as I was saying, is that the second driver of a government budget is the political class. and with the political class, the truth of the matter is, and it's not just Kenya, it's world over, is that the cost of getting leadership is usually rewarded through the budget, unfortunately. So you find, for example, their budget, if you start scrutinizing the budget lines for state departments, for government agencies, you realize that there is budgeted corruption. And year after year, the Auditor General has demonstrated that the problem with the country is budgeted corruption. And who approves the budget and who makes the budget? The executive, all right? And of course, the legislature approving the budget in parliament. So what we are saying is that the key drivers of budget in itself is where the problem is. So looking at the Vision 2030, the political class, the third one is what we talked about earlier, the donors or the development partners. They have their interests in terms of the projects they want to support the country with. So in the country budgeting, they have to ensure that they take care of these donors and development partners. And finally, it is the citizens. So the citizens come at the bottom. So what they promise the citizens during the campaigns, they try to ensure that that again is fixed in the budget. And as you have seen with this current government, they have tried to ensure that they fulfill promises, for example, such as the Hustlers Fund. Kenyans, of course, are divided on whether it is working or not, or whether that money, it was a scheme or not. So that is the complex nature in which the budget process is done. All right. So fighting corruption, it's easier said than done, and especially when the government is saying that they are so much keen on ensuring that they cut down the expenditure. If you look at the report of the Auditor General over the years, they say that most of the expenditures in government agencies and ministries are not supported. All right? Most of the expenditures do not have value for money, for example. So, and again, if you look at the budget line, you find that the cost of, for example, buying a printing paper in one state department is different from another state department. And these are the issues that the audit has been picking. So you realize that...
And even in counties.
Yes, and counties as well. So county government, the national government, budgeted corruption is a big problem. However, the saddest problem, the saddest state is that the watchdog bodies are basically helpless. They are unable to help us out of this situation. The Office of the Auditor General stands in a very good position. I've done some work with them, and I know the challenges that this office faces. If the office could be fully supported and funded to conduct audits, for example, like value for money audits, so that in every expenditure line, the Auditor General demonstrates whether there is value for money for that particular expenditure line, we can be able to deal with the issue of corruption. Another thing that the Auditor General has talked about over the years is that they would want support for funds that can allow them to even conduct forensic audits. Apart from the statutory audit they do and report to Parliament, value for money audits, forensic audits are critical audits that are supposed to be done for this government for us to be able to be out of the situation where we are right now. So basically, we are in a very difficult position. Our watchdog bodies, unfortunately, are helpless. They can't help us. And whereas the government is trying to, come up with aggressive measures of ensuring that the expenditure is dealt with, there is very little that is going to be seen.
Leo, whatever Brian is talking about is quite resonates to a number of Kenyans, because even the former president talked about 2 billion being siphoned every day, which at the time was more or less like a third of the budget. Yesterday, I remember the head of state also talked about corruption and said he wants to deal with it firmly. And we have to help him as Kenyans if at all we have to do away with corruption. What Brown is saying, in terms of strengthening the agencies involved, including the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, they have also talked about getting more or less like biting teeth. The Auditor General's report, we've had the control of budget. Every time that the aspect of corruption is mentioned, we talk about strengthening of some of these agencies. I would like to pick your mind on that.
I think the agencies are there and they're sufficiently empowered, but as our colleague here said, the corruption is systemic. It's been festering for the six decades of our independence. It's not anything that you can uproot overnight. It's the systems. I mean, right from the Tigger yeah, who probably knows where she gets her supplies from at a deal and probably inflates it and, passes it over to the very top in a ministry. There's corruption and it's systemic. So Kenyans just have to be patient to allow the agencies that are tasked with fighting corruptions to do their thing. I mean, we have multiple agencies, not just ESCC or the DCI, as you've mentioned. We even have agencies like the Asset Recovery Agency. Why aren't we seeing enough action from these asset recovery agencies? When Kenyans cry about profligate of the opulence that some of our leaders are displaying, somebody turns up in a Maybach Mercedes, which we know is close to 30 or 40 billion, yet 40 million. Yet a couple of years ago, this person was living from hand to mouth. Asset Recovery Agency doesn't need a court trial. It just needs to ask the person to come over and to prove that they've gotten whatever the asset they have legitimately. If they can't prove it, it's just simply one court order, and the asset is forfeited to the state. So we should see a lot of that kind of action, even if for the optics. And I will say the problem with this government is not so much that they're not fighting corruption, because every government, like I've said, from independence to the present, has been corrupt. The problem with this government is its optics. We have too many newly minted millionaires flaunting their wealth and with absolutely no
and our leaders are doing the same. Let's not hide our heads. Yeah. They are doing that in rallies, and we have seen them in their TikToks and
yes, and that's what is now stirring up the anger that we see in the nation, because you cannot talk about austerity measures, tightening of belts, when you yourself have a designer watch or you have designer shoes that are costing literally millions of shillings. Yeah, there's a disconnect between the rhetoric and the reality. The optics have to be managed by this government. I mean, hide your ill-gotten wealth, for God's sake, let us hear about it in Pandora Papers, but don't flaunt it in our faces,
Very true. Yeah. Brian, we'll talk about wastage and wage bill. Because if at all, the head of state yesterday said that over 100 shillings, 61 shillings, we are using that to repay debt. The remaining 39 shillings, that's where the wage bill is, that's where the recurrent expenditure is. But it is still a big thorn. We had a conference, a wage bill conference, I think it was back in March or April. But we have not been able to address the issue of wage bill. And sometimes we have even duplication of roles in government that more or less stretches the wage bill.
Yeah, I think wage bill is a big problem in government, and it's a problem that the government has struggled to fix. And it's a pretty straightforward problem for me, if you ask me. I mean, most of the positions you have seen even in government are positions that are not in the Constitution. Yeah, the Constitution is very clear in terms of the structure of government and who is supposed to be where. But you find, for example, offices have been created, the Chief Administrative Secretary, for example, and constitutional office, which the government has insisted that must be there. Yeah? If you look at the budget allocation for that particular function of government in a year, that can be able to build quite a number of affordable houses, for example, that is needed in the country right now. Yeah, if you look at, for example, allocation to, the spouses of the president and the deputy president, I mean, those are unconstitutional offices, by the way. Yeah, but you see, government allocation is being done every year in those offices. And if you look at, again, how the money that is taken to those offices is being spent, then you realize that there's a lot of wastage. Yeah, but I agree with him when he says that this is a systemic problem. It is a problem that has not started today. I remember even during the late President Mwai Kibaki's tenure, there's a point he told the country that 30% of our revenue goes to corruption. And you have to deal with it. Deal with the fact that we are going to build a country with 70% of our revenue.
Which that is gone.
In fact, the concept of 2 billion being lost every day emanated from that statement by President Kibaki years ago, when he said that we are losing 30% of our revenue every year on corruption. That is what is average to 2 billion per day, all right? So it's a big problem, and I think we need fresh kind of leadership to be able to help us deal with this systemic problem. Because the current faces in the political leadership in the country, as you can see, they are not able to face this problem head on and deal with it once and for all.
Let me pose this question in regards to our leaders. You do remember all eyes were watching State House yesterday, and when the president announced that he had shut down the bill, the MPs were very elated and they actually clapped. And remember, a day before, there were chaos in Parliament, the MPs trying to pass the bill itself. And Kenyans have talked about, let's recall our MPs if they are not helping us. Unfortunately, they are the ones who are going to be debating the next finance bill. We need to be very careful on who we put in these offices, because at the end of the day, we do not want them to go there and line their pockets with ill-gotten wealth. Right.
If you look at the body language of the president and everybody that was in State House yesterday, I'm not a body language expert, but by a mere look of the body language of the MPs and everybody that surrounded the president there, you see people who do not mean what they say. Kenyans are willing to sacrifice. Kenyans are willing to sacrifice for the sake of ensuring that the government runs. They are willing to pay taxes, they are willing to do everything that is required to ensure that we have a good country and a stable country. But the political leadership has never demonstrated from their end a sign of sacrifice. If you look at the control of budget allocation to Parliament and to the executive, you realize that these people have cushioned themselves against the economic effects that is currently facing the country. The country is facing currently. So the fact that Kenyans are seeing that they are taking significant sacrifices and the political class is not doing the same is what is leading us to where we are currently. Let me tell you, if we could see, for example, serious and significant measures from the head of state himself towards reducing the cost, in his office alone. Every weekend, you see the presidency, and I'm talking about now the president and his deputy, crisscrossing the country to attend church services. Do you know the cost of getting the president from State House to Bungoma for a church function? Do you know that cost?
No.
I don't want to talk about that cost here. But the
it's
cost...
enormous because of the entourage as
exactly.
well.
These people come with a fleet of... he flies, but he still has a fleet of almost 30 vehicles. The cost of removing the president from Nairobi to Kisumu, for example, for a function, every Sunday. And yet there are so many churches in Nairobi. Do you know we have so many churches compared to even schools in Nairobi here?
Somebody would argue that maybe because he's a symbol of national unity,
I was actually about to say that you've actually stolen my thunder, so to speak.
Okay.
I was about to say we must also be cognizant of the fact that the president is also a political figure. He's the executive, but he's a politician at the same time. And if he is conspicuously absent from the electorate who put him into power, then it poses a problem, particularly when it comes to the next elections. And I'm sure he has his eye on a re-election. So to that end, it behooves him to move from one part of the country when he can, just to let people know that it was not an election gimmick. He's still in touch with the grassroots. It's the unfortunate consequence of being a political figure.
There's something you want to add, but actually they can reduce the convoys, or maybe because he has talked about his office is going to be cutting down. So we are expecting some of the changes, to see the changes and the impact as well. You wanted to add something?
You see, what he's saying is correct. I mean, it's a symbol of national unity. But the country is at a very difficult position. And we are not saying the president should not go at all. Instead of going every week, go even once. I mean, President Kibaki never used to fly everywhere every week. Yeah, I mean, he used to be around, and people could still feel that our president is here and is present as a symbol of national unity. So what you're saying, as we take the austerity measures, we need to see from his office that he is holding prayers in the State House, or if he's going around the country, then he reduces that to maybe once or twice a month all right? Another thing, if you look at the foreign travel, the budget for the foreign travel in the presidency alone, you have seen these international forums where presidents from various countries are coming. I think you'll agree with me that not all presidents from all countries attend those functions.
And it's a good thing. He also mentioned that his office is going to cut down on travel.
Correct.
That's something that he mentioned and made it clear for Kenyans that he's going to cut down on that as well.
So we wait to see.
Yes.
Wait to see. So why? You ask yourself, how come some presidents don't just show up in those international forums? The reason is they send representatives, 1 or 2 people, all right? And why are they doing that? Because they are trying to reduce or cut on their foreign travel as a result of the situation in their countries. So our president can also send representatives.
So sometimes I wonder, how effective would that be? I mean, our president is, one of the few who have been invited for a state visit, not an official visit, a state visit with all the honors, you know. And to be the devil's advocate, sometimes I think what we ought to do is to interrogate the efficacy of some of those visits to see what has come out of it. Yes, you spend this much money, it's inordinately high, but do we have benefits? I remember the deputy president at one point talking about his travels, and they had amounted to about 4 billion shillings. But he gave an account of himself and said, look, from my spending of 4 billion shillings, I've gotten grants of 12 billion shillings. So for me, that was a very good return on investment. So we need to look at the end result. What comes out of it? Is it justifiable, or is it just a jaunt? Because I doubt it's just a leisure jaunt that the president is on. Yeah, I doubt it's a leisure jaunt.
All right, let's first of all cross over to Mombasa and have a feel. We had seen earlier on, we had seen some of the youths there with some placards and protesting. As you can see from the live pictures, that is Moi Avenue still, my director? Yeah, it's still Moi Avenue, and businesses shut. As you can see, that's a press vehicle that is having journalists trying to cover that. And as you can see, it's more or less like a ghost town. Businesses are closed. A number of protesters there. Perfect picture for yes, exactly. They are protesting, the protesters, and a number of youths there standing in the middle of Mombasa with their placards. Some have seen some with some twigs. They are still from the last pictures, gentlemen, as you had seen, is that we had a few protesters, but they are slowly but surely. We have someone standing on. Okay, those are live pictures from Moi Avenue, where protesters have already begun protesting in regards to the finance bill that was shot down by the president yesterday, and we don't know quite exactly where they are taking their protest to, but they are exercising their democratic right of picketing and also carrying placards and protesting. We'll be getting a more detailed report in subsequent bulletin and also during the day. Back to my topic of discussion now, we have Leonard and Brian who know a thing or two about economics and taxes. Back to you, Brian. You have worked with county governments as well.
Yeah.
And looking at being a forensic auditor, you see all the loopholes, you see where money is being used in a way that they shouldn't. Which are some of these loopholes that county government, because some county governments, the head of state said that also county governments need to adopt the austerity measures that his office and government are going to be adopting. What are some of these loopholes that we should be sealing in county governments?
I think the problem with county governments, and by the way, this cuts across, but majorly county governments suffer from procurement corruption, procurement fraud. That is the biggest problem in county governments. There have been a debate in this country for quite some time now on how to automate the government procurement process from county government to national government. This has never seen the end of day. This discussion started during the late President Kibaki's time on how the procurement process can be automated in government. As we speak now, We have never...
Just hold the thought. As you can see on your screen, those are live pictures from Nyayo Stadium, where that is indeed the military that was gazetted the day before yesterday and passed yesterday by parliamentarians to be on the streets. Abdi Aziz is currently keeping his eyes peeled on that report. Let's cross over and hear what he has been able to gather.
Well, currently we are here at Nyayo Stadium. You do remember, our viewers, if you're just joining us, the members of parliament on Wednesday morning approved the deployment of Kenya Defence Forces officers within the country to restore order after the deadly protests that were witnessed across the country on Tuesday. What you're seeing now is the military wing out to leave at any moment from now, ensure that the country is safer. Now, this follows when the House voted to approve the motion by the National Assembly Majority Leader, who is Kimani Ichung'wah, hours after Defence Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale gazetted the KDF deployment. The soldiers will support a Kenya Police Service to restore normalcy across the country following the anti-finance bill protests that turned tragic on Tuesday. You do remember what President William Ruto clearly stated, and who was the Commander-in-Chief clearly stated, that the government will use all its avenues to ensure that you're safer and your business premises and houses are safer as well. This includes deployment of the military. Now, already the military officers, as you can see on your screen, have already been deployed from their various barracks. They're here at the Nyayo Stadium, and any moment from now, Nyayo Stadium is parts of Nairobi to ensure security. The Gazette notice that was given by the Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale will ensure the KDF will offer ample security and support to the police service. And we are to ascertain if the KDF have also been deployed in other parts of the country. But here in the capital, as you can see on your screens, we can confirm to you here in Nairobi, the KDF have been deployed. And any moment from now, they're expected to leave the barracks. We saw the military presence later in the evening on Tuesday at the mausoleum, Parliament, which they did restore order. And following the Gazette notice, they're here. Now, of course, the Gazette notice, as well as the orders the Commander-in-Chief and the Defence Cabinet Secretary are relying on, is Article 241(3)(b) of the Kenyan Constitution. Deployment of the Kenya Defence Forces in support of the national service. According to Duale, the deployment was in response to the security caused by the violent protests in various parts of the country, and they will offer support. Now, the article clearly further stipulates about deployment of the Kenya Defence Forces in Kenya. Under the Article 241 of the Constitution, there are only two scenarios that KDF can be deployed within our borders: to support the police in situations of emergency, and secondly, deployment to restore peace in any part within the country. Now, to support the police in the situations of emergency that was precipitated on Tuesday, and to ascertain the security of Kenyans, especially Nairobians, today, is Section 3B of Article 241(3) says that the Defence Forces shall assist and cooperate with other authorities in situations of emergency or disaster, and report to the National Assembly whenever deployed in such circumstances. And following the sitting that was done on Wednesday morning, it has allowed them to be out today. Now, further, according to Section 34 of the KDF Act, it is explicit on the regulations of support of the police. Now, the Section 34(1) provides that in the event the Kenya forces are being deployed in support of the National Police Service, such deployment shall comply with constitutional standards relating to human rights and fundamental freedoms. Section 34.2 says further that the deployment of the Defence Forces is in support of the National Police Service happens, the Cabinet Secretary shall within 24 hours issue a notice in a Gazette notice of the commencement of such a deployment, which has been the case. Where the deployment under this scenario has been discounted, the Cabinet Secretary shall within 24 hours issue the notice of discontinuation of the deployment. However, that has not happened, but we are duly informed that there is a case at the Milimani Law Court challenging the deployment of KDF. We're waiting to see what the courts will say about the deployment. Finally, the CS is also required to report to the National Assembly on the deployment. Now, it is very crucial, even if as a KDF are being tapped to join their fellow brethren, that is the National Police Service, their duties and powers they ought to adhere to under the Section 35 of the KDF Act, which the Act says that whenever the Defence Forces or any portion or member thereof has been deployed in support of the police or in a security operation, that KDF members shall have the same powers and exercise the same duties as those conferred or imposed upon a member of the National Police Service. The powers and duties referred to may only be exercised or performed for a successful execution of that of the deployment, maintenance of law and order, or preservation of the internal security of the state. However, there is a caveat to that particular section, that such powers and duties referred to shall not include powers and duties to investigate crimes, which is the sole responsibility of the local enforcements that are able to operate within our borders. The law provides that in such an operation or support of the police, a member of the Kenya Defence Forces who arrests or detain any person or seizes any article or object shall, as soon as possible, hand that person to the police. That goes hand in hand, given that the police have the mandate to investigate any crimes that have been committed within our borders. And according to the law, the KDF are expected, when they seize anybody they believe to be either rogue or involved in any criminal activities, they're expected to hand them over to the police. Of this article relating to the powers and duties of a member of the Defence Forces may not be construed as removing, distracting, or diminishing any power of duty expressly conferred, enforced, or imposed by any other law upon such member of the Defence Forces. Now, members of the Defence Forces deployed in terms of restoring peace shall receive appropriate training before such deployment and shall be equipped accordingly, which you can now see on your screens. If you're just joining us, dear viewers, we are here at the Njue.
Thank you very much, my colleague Abdiaziz Hashim, who has pitched a tent at the Nyayo National Stadium. As you have seen, the soldiers with all their gears ready for any eventualities that may arise today as the Gen Zs continue with their protest, if they're going to be having those protests in the CBD and any other establishment. Just a quick reminder is that it was gazetted for them to assist the police in quell the violence and also to protect some of the protected areas. And from Nyayo National Stadium, let's get into the city just outside the Supreme Court. My colleague Alan has made his way to the Supreme Court, where you do remember the day before yesterday, it was one of the places where which bared the brunt of the protesters, with 7 vehicles being burnt and also some of the offices, including the CJ's one, being razed down to the ground. Over to you, Alan.
Indeed, it is still a very chilly morning here where we are at the intersection of Wabera Street and City Hall Way, just in front of the Supreme Court of Kenya. Here is a place that saw a lot of drama just several hours ago, if I can say, where you saw crowds chanting and a lot of lobbying of tear gas. But now it is quiet. This morning, at the 27th of June, Thursday, it looks overcast here, maybe perhaps showing the mood that things are despondent. As you can see, this is just the the situation right now outside the Supreme Court of Kenya, no activity at all. We can still see the evidence of the destruction that was seen here, where protesters were able to breach the precincts of the Supreme Court. We can see one or two pedestrians walking on the road here. It's not like in the earlier link that we showed you where we saw a lot of Kenyans. That was downtown. Here we are what Nairobians like to call uptown, where there's not usually a lot of activity. There's usually a lot of government buildings. There's a few offices of foreign companies and so on and so forth. What you are seeing right now are just remnants, and I don't know if the camera is doing it justice. The street is still colored pink, a testament of the kind of, the kind of battle, if I should say, that was going on here. The pink is thrown all over. Nothing is spared. Trees, electricity poles, security camera poles, pavements, the road itself covered with pink, which is actually the high pressure water that was being ejected from the water cannons here. We are seeing several parked on the side of the road, but still, nevertheless, pedestrians are still going on about their business, as you can see. We still have a few commuters making their way into town. We are seeing some businesses that probably were watching us and trying to gauge whether they should come and open, but we are still seeing very, popular joints, very popular eateries and restaurants are still closed. Of course, you can see one of the most famous retail chains here, Carrefour Market, is closed. It's one of the supermarkets that was damaged during the protests and looted as well. We also saw a lot of, when we were coming to this particular street, as we made our way from Archives area, the famous bus stop at Kencom, we did see a lot of county staff, the cleaning staff from the Nairobi City County, just trying to clear a lot of the debris still that were strewn all over the street. And I can tell you, if you were here that day in the evening, the kind of clutter that was here was a lot. It looked a bit apocalyptic. What we can see also here on Wabera Street, we can see one of the water cannons. We counted about 10 as we were coming here, just packed all over town. One of the water cannons just blocking the way going into the Macmillan Library. If you know Nairobi City very well, this particular water bows are blocking that street. Yes, the road is still open for traffic, except that one is partly closed. You'll see a few cars just trying to push through there. Otherwise, the other lane that is inbound towards Macmillan Library is closed. Moving on to the side of City Hall, where we did see part of it being razed by fire. The building itself is mostly intact, and you can see a few people just walking past it. This part of town is very eerily quiet, I can say. It's very eerily quiet, it's cold, people are just walking very slowly here, people are minding their own business. You can see a part of the damage that befell this particular building, which is one of the oldest buildings in this capital. We can also still see a few emergency vehicles just making past. We are not sure if they are carrying anyone or if they're just doing rounds or what they are doing, but you can even see emergency vehicles. This particular one you're seeing belonging to the Red Cross, just making its way through town, a sign that everything seems ready for any eventuality. One thing I also have to just show you is the security contingent that is based here, just here at outside the Kenyatta International Convention Center. We are seeing security personnel camped outside with their security vehicle, just getting ready for anything. We've seen this all over town, by the way. We did see a lot of these trucks strewn all over town with groups of security personnel just manning the streets and people minding their own business. No one is coming to provoke them or anything like that. People are just keeping vigil here, just walking about their business as it were at this point, at this time. Meanwhile, the rest of town, as we've seen, we've been going through town now. We've been to Archives, Kencom area. We have been to the side of Standard Street. We have been to the sides of the famous Moi Avenue, Naivas, where we have that 24-hour supermarket. It's closed. It's unprecedented. This is a supermarket that is always open 24 hours a day, but today it's closed. But we do see a bit of activity. It's getting to the afternoon, and therefore probably Kenyans will probably want to come and check out the area, because probably there was some apprehension that it's a bit too early, or a bit, they were taking just caution to come into town. But so far, this is what we are seeing. And we'll be here to just give you a bit more updates of what is happening and the status of the people, the sights and sounds of what is going on here. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Alan Aoko live just outside the city county offices and also the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, we have not been able to get you to know exactly or whether there are any activities going on inside the Supreme Court, being one of the areas that bared the biggest brunt of the protesters on the day before yesterday. And just a quick one, in Mombasa and Kisumu, as we have seen some pockets of protesters, but everything is calm so far. Achola Simon was talking about the youth had already gathered there since morning, and let's wait as the security organs taking no chances whatsoever. We have seen even the military have been deployed as well. I'm still having a live conversation here on the state of the nation, and especially on how we make sure that we are having something that we can be proud of. We can cut on expenditures, just as the head of state talked about yesterday, and also check on how we utilize our meager resources that we have in the country, not forgetting the big baggage of the loans that we have acquired over the years. Brian, apologies, we had to cross over to give Kenyans a feel of how other counties are as well. We're talking about how counties and some of the holes that we have seen, we've punched ourselves, and it's taking us to somewhere quite difficult, and especially when it comes to finances.
Yeah, so I think, as I was explaining, the biggest problem in wastage, that contributes to wastage in counties, is the procurement process. The procurement process, as it is right now, is largely manual. A debate on how to automate that process so that there's no human interference from the beginning to the end has been there for some time now. And we sometimes ask ourselves why this has not been prioritized by the government. Perhaps there are people who benefit through that process, and that's why it is not being affected. But that could be able to deal with the menace of procurement fraud in the county governments. Another thing affecting wastage in the counties is that the procurement procedures in the counties are more procedural than commercial. And by this I mean is that the procurement function in the county governments, and it cuts across government departments, is concerned with following myriad rules and procedures than focusing on maximizing the value for the money that is being spent by the government. And as a result of lack of commercial acumen, the government has been able to lose a lot of money and waste a lot of money in the procurement process. Another problem affecting, another factor that contributes to the wastage in the county governments, and this I've highly recommended the Office of the Auditor General, is the lack of intelligent information system that can collate, compare, and join the dots on a real-time basis of all the expenditures and the budget line. Yeah, if this could happen, then there will be a full and real-time view of all the expenditure items within these county governments and the state departments at large. So mainly those two areas are contributing to the wastage that we currently see in the public sector.
Leo, perhaps we can also touch on that as we also look at protecting the rights and the freedoms as enshrined in the Constitution, because Kenya, to be very honest, has not had a very clean record in terms of human rights, as we have seen and heard over the years. And this always will just chase away investors.
I beg to differ. I think by and large we are a beacon in the region when it comes to human rights and the way they are upheld.
Why I'm saying this is
yeah.
because you do remember the last financial bill, how many people were murdered. And the day before yesterday, even the Kenya National Human Rights Commission has also pointed out some of these things.
There is a perception that liberties are license. There's a difference between fundamental rights and liberties and license. Liberties are not licensed to engage in an illegal activity. I'll give you an example. The people who overran parliament, they had been allowed, according to the laws of the land, that allow picketing or demonstrations, to take to the streets and to air their grievances. But the same laws did not allow them to break down the fence of parliament and to get into parliament and to, engage in the wanton distractions that we saw.
Actually, there's no law that
captured on live TV.
Yeah.
So in instances such as those where the rights of others infringe, or the rights of, say, demonstrators of that sort infringe on those of others, the law has to take its case. And one of the most unfortunate consequences of that is death, obviously. Yeah, and whereas it is really highly regrettable, it is an outcome of lawlessness. It's an outcome of anarchy. Where there is anarchy, it results. Take the same example of Parliament, for instance. The CS Internal Security had gone on television warning people not to overrun certain protected areas. And I think he specifically mentioned Parliament and State House, told them that those were off limits. And he even provided, gave them cordons of where they should do their picketing or their demonstrations, and defined areas where they were not supposed to transgress. So the fellows who ran into Parliament and got shot, honestly, how do you blame the police? How does it become a human rights issue? If they overrun the police and they go in there with the knives and stuff like that and they want to kill, in as much as it is really regrettable, it's reprehensible that some of them had to lose their lives, it's just an outcome of what happens. But I say that we have great fundamental rights and liberties that have been fought for over the years, of course, starting from the Second Liberation Movement, moving all the way to the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, which is arguably one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. It gives us a lot of rights and liberties. And if you doubt what I'm saying, you need only to go next door to one of our neighbors that is usually described as a police state, whose name I won't mention, but we all know which it is, or other countries in the region where this sort of picketing cannot be countenanced by those in authority. You need only go to those states to realize that we enjoy great freedoms. And the very fact that we had peaceful demonstrations earlier, before they were infiltrated by hooligans, proves that, yes, our laws and regulations are in place and that guarantee these fundamental rights and liberties for citizens.
Yeah. And some of the ways that we can be able to assist, and the government or can be able to assist and especially bring in or rope in more investors, is negotiating better deals, Brian. Yeah. Talking about more or less like what we had done with the G2G, government to government oil deal. Of course, we still haven't gotten a clear vision of exactly how that has helped the country to maybe bring down the cost of living or even the cost of fuel. But as you prepare with that point, those are live pictures from Mombasa Road. These were some of the military vehicles, the infantry vehicles that were at Nyayo National Stadium, and from the look of things, they are headed to the Nairobi CBD. Again, those are some of the live pictures from Mombasa Road, being followed up by one of our crew, that is Abdiaziz Hashim. Remember, the government had gazetted the deployment of the military to assist our security agencies to quell violence, and more specifically to protect protected areas. And just as Abdi had mentioned, is that they are making, or they could be making their way to the CBD, and that is exactly what they are doing. And they are following them up, so we will be knowing exactly where they are headed to. But again, that is the military who are assisting our police to maintain peace, order, and law. Brian.
So in terms of trying to encourage investors to, invest in the country, I think we have not done bad as such as a country, because we have seen key investors coming to invest in the country. The government has tried to, open up the special economic zone. The government has tried to, for example, indulge in the conversations around the double taxation agreements with different countries to ensure that if you are doing business here, then you are not taxed here as much as you are taxed in your country, And I think the only place that the government has not done much, as I said earlier, is on the aspect of the stability and predictability of our taxes. I think many investors are saying that they are not sure. They are saying that our they lack what we call the stable and predictable tax environment, and because of that, their businesses are not certain. All right, yeah. But in general approach that has been taken by the government to ensure that investors, the country is attractive to investors, I think it's something that we need to recommend the government.
Very well.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I've been given a minute each so that we may wrap it up. I'll begin with you, Leo.
Yeah, great discussion. Yeah, we are at that point in our history where a decision has to be made one way or the other about this finance bill, and we'll be waiting to see in the coming days how it pans out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that as a nation we have come to a point where people are willing to sit and discuss national issues that are affecting the country. I thank the presidency for coming down, as the young people are saying it outside there, and listen to the people. I mean, he has given serious commitment to have a multi-sectoral approach in terms of trying to address the issues that are currently bedeviling the country. My only prayer is that may whatever they say be actioned at the end of the day, because they say very good things at face value, but we see very little results on the ground.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That has been Brian Omondi, who is a tax auditor and also a governance expert. And just next to him, we have Leonard Kafafa, who is an economist and also a public policy analyst. These two gentlemen, thank you so much indeed, gentlemen, for your time and your insight as well, as we are keeping vigil to see exactly how the day pans out. But we have our reporters, Abdi. We also have JJ Kioria Wahungu. We have my colleague Nancy Okware, also Achola Simon is keeping tabs in Kisumu, and also Anboro is keeping up with the demos in Mombasa. So we will be keeping you updated with a live coverage, a 360 degrees coverage of the day's events. My name, Ben Troy Njue, holding brief on Biz Check. On behalf of everyone who has made this broadcast a success, thank you so much. I'm giving the baton now to Kurunzi and Tamrini, which is coming to you in the next couple of minutes. Do have yourself a blessed and safe day.